Do you remember those forgotten sandwiches? The ones you could only find in old cookbooks tucked away on a shelf? Back then, sandwiches were homemade lifelines, packed in lunchboxes, wrapped in wax paper, and eaten between long shifts or after school. How did something so simple and so loved just disappear? Now this one came out of left field, unless you grew up near a Chinatown diner. The egg foo young sandwich was one of those things that made 0 sense on paper, but the second you took a bite, you stopped asking questions. Start with an egg patty, crispy on the outside, soft on the inside, and packed with bean sprouts, green onions, maybe a little chopped pork or shrimp if you got the good kind. Then came the gravy. Not just poured, but drenched. Thick brown gravy ladled right over the patty until it practically dripped off the sides. Slide the whole thing into a hamburger bun, close it up, and prepare yourself for the kind of meal that laughs in the face of napkins. It was heavy, hot, and heartwarming. The egg foo young sandwich felt like the kind of invention you only make when you are really hungry and just messing around in the kitchen. But in the 1970s, this was a lunchtime legend for anyone who knew where to find it. Of course, if you were not lucky enough to live near a place that served one of these, you probably grew up with something even saltier, way more military, and still showing up on diner menus today. The fried bologna and mustard sandwich is one of those classic comfort foods that speaks to simplicity and practicality. A true Southern favorite, this sandwich became a staple in many households during tough times when meat was scarce and budgets were tight. Bologna, a processed meat that was inexpensive and easy to find, was fried until it curled up, creating crispy, golden edges that added texture and flavor to the sandwich. The bologna's richness was perfectly complemented by a generous smear of mustard, which added a tangy zing that cut through the greasy richness of the fried meat. It wasn't a sophisticated meal, but it was satisfying, hearty, and filled you up without costing much. The best part was how easy it was to prepare. A quick fry on the stove and a spread of mustard, and you had yourself a meal in no time. The bologna was affordable and could be bought in bulk, making it a practical choice for families trying to stretch their food dollar. While it may not have been gourmet, the fried bologna and mustard sandwich provided a familiar, comforting taste that many still remember fondly today. It wasn't about fancy ingredients or elaborate cooking methods. It was about making something hearty and satisfying with what was available. And while this classic combo hits the spot, the next sandwich on our list takes another humble ingredient and turns it into something surprisingly delicious. Remember what chilly days at Graham's called for back in the day? If you guessed hot turkey sandwich, you're absolutely right. This sandwich was another one of Grandma's delicious ways of using up leftover turkey from Thanksgiving. This sandwich featured slices of tender turkey served hot, often open-faced, with a generous ladle of rich, savory gravy poured over the top. Sounds delicious, right? Grandma made her hot turkey sandwich special with the gravy. Whether she made it from scratch with turkey drippings or used a trusted recipe, the rich gravy soaked into the bread, making each bite juicy and flavorful. She knew that nothing went to waste, and the hot turkey sandwich was a delicious way to make the most of those leftovers. So, this next sandwich is also typically made from only 3 ingredients, but it's still one of Grandma's most iconic creations. I'm talking about the infamous BLT sandwich. The name is an abbreviation for the ingredients: bacon, lettuce, and tomato. This sandwich was a summertime favorite, especially when tomatoes were at their ripest in Graham's garden. The BLT's roots can be traced back to tea sandwiches served in the late 19th century, but it wasn't until World War II when it gained popularity. During this time, supermarkets made bacon, lettuce, and tomatoes more widely available all year round, and Grandma made sure to use them up in the kitchen. A classic BLT is often made with mayonnaise, but some purists argue that the sandwich should be spread with butter instead. Well, it's still up for debate, so make sure to let us know your take on it in the comments. Sometimes simplicity is key, and the relish and cheese sandwich is the epitome of that principle. A slice of American cheese paired with a dollop of sweet pickle relish was all it took to create this unexpected but surprisingly delicious sandwich. The relish added a little sweetness and tang, while the cheese gave it a creamy, melty texture. It wasn't about fancy ingredients, just bread, cheese, and relish. The sweet and salty combination made it a great quick snack when funds were tight and you needed something to fill you up without breaking the bank. The relish provided a burst of flavor, cutting through the richness of the cheese, and the sandwich itself was easy to put together with ingredients that were often on hand. Even though it may seem like an odd combination, the simplicity of the relish and cheese sandwich made it a popular choice for those who needed something quick and satisfying. Whether you had it as a snack or a meal, it always offered a good balance of flavors. This sandwich wasn't going to win any gourmet awards, but it did the job when you needed a cheap and satisfying meal. Sometimes, it's the simplest combinations that leave the greatest impression. But if you think a slice of cheese and a bit of relish is all you need for a great sandwich, the next one might just take your taste buds by surprise. You knew the Red Devil logo before you ever tasted it. That Underwood deviled ham can have a certain energy to it, bold, strange, and just a little too happy for what was inside. Still, one taste and you got it. Deviled ham salad was the low-key hero of school lunches and late-night sandwiches. It was creamy, salty, a little tangy, and just weird enough to make you wonder how it became so popular. Mix that canned meat paste with mayonnaise and relish, maybe a dash of mustard if you were daring, and you had a spread that knew how to work a slice of white bread. It was chilled, it was comforting, and it stuck to the roof of your mouth like a secret you could not wait to tell. This was the kind of sandwich you did not brag about, but secretly loved. And it was there for you, on road trips, in brown bags, and even at midnight when you could not sleep. It never looked fancy, but it never needed to. Deviled ham was a flavor bomb dressed up like a cold cut. But if you wanted something a little fresher, a little more deli style, then nothing hit quite like a stack of corned beef with a side of slaw and just enough spice to make you pay attention. Sliced bananas with mayo on white bread. This banana and mayonnaise sandwich is a bit of a wild card for sure, but keep an open mind because the South definitely does, which is where this interesting creation finds its origins. Typically, a lot of comfort food comes out of the southern USA. As you may have guessed, preparing this is as simple as taking candy from a toddler. Now I know what you're thinking. Bananas and mayo sounds worse than water and oil. However, there's a reason it comes into comfort food. All you need is a sliced banana, 2 slices of fresh bread, and a good spread of mayo. Maybe not the best you'll ever have, but what's the downside? Give this forgotten experiment a try and see if it's up your alley. The key to a good sandwich was in its simple ingredients, and Graham knew it better than anyone. That's why she whipped up the classic chicken salad sandwich anytime we craved some comfort food. Chicken salad has been a beloved dish in American homes since the mid-1800s. Grandma decided to make it into a hearty sandwich to make snack time better. Grandma's version of the chicken salad sandwich often included unique ingredients passed down through generations. Depending on where your grandma hails from, her chicken salad sandwich recipe might have a regional flair. In the South, you might find it spiced with a bit of mustard or pickle juice, while in New England, cranberries might be tossed in for a touch of tartness. Sometimes, simplicity was the answer when it came to making a meal out of what was available, and the ketchup sandwich was a prime example of that. When food was scarce and the pantry was running low, a ketchup sandwich became a quick, affordable solution. It was as simple as it sounds, just bread and ketchup. It may not seem like much, but for many families, it was a meal that could be thrown together in a matter of minutes, with nothing more than 2 slices of bread and a squeeze of ketchup. There was something comforting about the tangy sweetness of the ketchup paired with the soft, familiar bread, making it a surprisingly satisfying combination. It wasn't about fancy ingredients. It was about making the most out of what you had. If you were lucky and payday wasn't far off, you might even add a Kraft single for a little extra richness, transforming it into a cheese and ketchup sandwich. But in its most basic form, the ketchup sandwich was a testament to the resourcefulness of families making do in tough times. It was a meal that required little preparation but still filled the stomach. This sandwich wasn't about high-end flavors or ingredients. It was about stretching what little you had and getting through the day with a simple, reliable meal. And while the ketchup sandwich was straightforward, it's about to get a little more indulgent with the next sandwich, where the flavor combinations get a bit more interesting. Spam and pineapple might sound like a dare, but in the 1970s, it was practically dinner. This sandwich was all about stretching the rules and the budget. A thick slice of Spam got pan-fried until it was brown and crispy around the edges, then placed on a hamburger bun like it belonged there. Then came the twist: a pineapple ring, right on top. Not fresh pineapple, mind you. We are talking about the canned kind, sweet and syrupy, straight from the tin. The two came together like an accidental masterpiece: salty, smoky Spam playing off the sugary tang of the pineapple in a way that confused your brain but delighted your taste buds. Some people added a bit of mustard, others just left it at that. Either way, it was weirdly good. Spam was everywhere during the war and stuck around long after, and by the 70s, folks had gotten creative with it. This sandwich was born out of necessity and stayed for nostalgia. It was quick, affordable, and always sparked conversation. Even if you did not like it, you remembered it. But if you were not into tropical flair, maybe you preferred your cheese melted and broiled to golden glory. Open-faced and unapologetically old school. Bologna and potato salad sandwiches were just as effective at getting the entire family on the table and doubling as the perfect school lunch for your kid. Grade 5 or high school, none of that mattered, because even adults well into their career enjoyed these. People working long jobs would pack a bologna and potato salad sandwich in their backpack to ensure all their food needs were met. Often you would come into a home around the afternoon and find kids glued to the TV with a bologna and potato salad sandwich in hand. Mixing in some chicken chunks or chips would only upgrade an already stellar dish, and we definitely want potato salads and this sandwich to make a comeback. Speaking of meaty sandwiches, the Turkey Club sandwich was another fan favorite. Now, this one was known for its 3 layers of bread, which made it stand out from the rest of the sandwiches on the table. The club sandwich has its roots in American culinary history, with some sources suggesting it was first served in private social clubs in the late 19th century. By the time Grandma was making them, it had already become the talk of the town. Gram often made this one the day after Thanksgiving when there was no shortage of leftover roast turkey in the refrigerator. The key ingredient in this sandwich was crispy bacon, which Gram added to make it kid-friendly and 10 times more delicious. Grandma's Turkey Club sandwich was often cut in quarters or halves, which made it easier to eat, and this was the first time sandwiches were cut diagonally. And remember the toothpicks Gram used to hold it together with colorful cellophane frills? Brings back memories, doesn't it? Corned beef tongue with mustard in between fluffy bread slices. Okay, beef tongue might be way out of your palate, but don't disregard the corned beef tongue sandwich just yet. For something to fade from history, it's got to cement its spot there first, right? Can't do that if you don't bring something to the table. Perhaps this one will bring a lot more than you'd expect. It's traditionally prepared with carrots, garlic, red pepper, black pepper, salt, onions, mayo, and spice like bell pepper, paprika, and some garnishes like lime and parsley. So we already have the makings of a savory delight. You really want to keep a close eye on the beef tongue while it's in the pot, though. It can alter the flavor or dry it out fast. Though this sandwich has faded into the past now, the intricacy and delicacy through which it was created is a marvel to look back at. Maybe one day, this sandwich will come back at fancy restaurants, but for now, it remains a figment of the past. The mayonnaise and lettuce sandwich may seem like an odd combination at first, but it was a simple, satisfying meal for many families during tough times. Before the era of trendy BLTs and elaborate sandwiches, this humble sandwich was a go-to for those looking for something fresh and easy to prepare. Made with crisp iceberg lettuce and creamy mayonnaise, it provided a refreshing crunch and rich flavor, often when other ingredients were too expensive or scarce. Iceberg lettuce was inexpensive and readily available, making it the perfect base for this sandwich. The mayonnaise added a creamy texture, making each bite smooth and comforting. While this sandwich may not have been fancy, it was beloved for its simplicity and the way it brightened up an otherwise basic meal. In times when fresh produce was limited, the lettuce offered a rare dose of green, and the mayo brought a touch of indulgence. It wasn't a sandwich for a gourmet feast, but it was a practical and affordable meal when resources were stretched thin. For many families, the mayonnaise and lettuce sandwich was the only fresh food they could afford. It wasn't about gourmet ingredients or complex flavors. It was about making do with what was available, and it worked. This sandwich served as a reminder of how, sometimes, the simplest meals are the ones that bring comfort. But if you think this sandwich was basic, wait until you see what's next, where the simplicity of the meal gets a little more daring. Now this one had drama. The tuna boat melt was not just a sandwich, it was an event. You start with a sub roll, soft in the middle, split open like it is waiting for a miracle. In goes a scoop of tuna salad, but not the watery kind. This was chunky, mayo-rich, maybe with a little celery if you were lucky. Then come the tomato slices, thin, juicy, and laid down like armor. And finally, cheddar cheese, shredded, sliced, whatever worked, blanketing the whole thing like a warm hug. Slide the whole sandwich under a broiler and wait. That is the moment things change. The edges of the bread crisp up, the cheese bubbles and browns, and the tomato softens just enough to soak into the tuna. You pull it out just in time to stop it from burning, but almost wish it had. This was the sandwich version of comfort food theater. It smelled like warmth. It looked like golden perfection. It tasted like something way fancier than it was. Parents made it to use up tuna, but kids remembered it like a feast. But if this one was golden, wait until you meet the sandwich that vanished from lunch counters just as fast as it appeared. Sometimes a quick and simple solution was needed when the month's budget was running low. Enter the cold hot dog slices and ketchup sandwich. This sandwich was made with leftover hot dogs, sliced cold, and slathered with ketchup between slices of bread. It wasn't fancy, but it was cheap, easy to make, and comforting. After payday, people might have splurged on hot dogs, but by the end of the week, those leftovers would be repurposed into this quick fix. The cold hot dog slices were nothing more than a vehicle for the ketchup, but when combined with bread, it made a satisfying snack or lunch. There wasn't much finesse to it, but it worked. It might not win any culinary awards, but when you've got limited resources, you make do with what you have. And while this sandwich may seem like an odd pairing, it's definitely one you'd want to try if you're in need of a last-minute meal. However, if you're craving something a little heartier, the next sandwich might just be what you're looking for. Spam and pineapple sandwiches, on the other hand, are a Hawaiian invention that makes some stomachs less audible. On the other hand, if you are anything like us, then maybe the blend of spices, fruits, and canned pork and ham will create a unique flavor trip for you. Spam and pineapple sandwiches in the state of Hawaii would usually be accompanied with things like mango slices or mango chutney, peppers, chili pastes, and fresh coleslaw. All of this really elevated the dish and gave it a strong identity to pull from when it was making impressions on people for the first time in the 70s, and most were good ones. While pineapples are eternally hated in America, this is one mix of different foods that a lot of citizens could get in line for, and that is why we are sad to see this one gone. Florida was known for its delicious sandwiches, and grandmas in the Sunshine State were masters at making the Cuban sandwich. It was brought to the States by Cuban immigrants and instantly became the talk of the town in Tampa and Miami. Traditionally, Cuban sandwiches were pressed in a sandwich press, or plancha, which gave them their distinctive crispy crust. Grandma knew the secret to a great Cuban sandwich was in the press. The sandwich had to be pressed just right, so that the bread was crispy and the cheese melted, but the inside was still warm and full of flavor. There's even a special day to celebrate this sandwich. National Cuban Sandwich Day is celebrated on August 23rd each year. Make sure to mark your calendars. The mashed potato sandwich is one of those unassuming comfort foods that became a staple for many families during hard times. When there wasn't much in the pantry, leftover mashed potatoes provided a quick and filling solution. The sandwich itself was simple. Just a hearty serving of mashed potatoes spread between two slices of bread. While it might sound basic, the potatoes brought both substance and satisfaction, especially when other food options were limited. The mashed potatoes could be enhanced with black pepper or a drizzle of gravy if you were lucky enough to have it, adding a little extra flavor to what was essentially a very simple dish. The real beauty of the mashed potato sandwich was its versatility. If you had no other ingredients, it could still make a fulfilling meal. It was also a great way to use up leftovers from a previous meal, turning a side dish into the main course. This sandwich wasn't about gourmet flavors or complex ingredients. It was about being resourceful and making the most out of what you had. For many, it was an affordable, easy way to stretch meals further, especially when money was tight. The mashed potato sandwich might not have been the most glamorous option, but it was a meal that served its purpose well. And while it might seem simple, the next sandwich on our list takes leftovers and transforms them into a surprisingly hearty option. Now, bologna is not what you would call glamorous, but in the 1970s, someone took that humble meat and turned it into a straight-up miracle. Enter the bologna pizza sandwich. This was not a joke, it was genius. You start with a soft hamburger bun, maybe left over from the weekend cookout. On the bottom half, you lay down a slice of bologna, and if you are doing it right, you give it a quick sizzle in a frying pan so the edges curl up like a little meatball. Then you spoon on tomato sauce, canned, homemade, whatever you have, and top it with shredded mozzarella. After that, into the broiler it goes. What comes out is pure nostalgia with melted cheese dripping down the sides and the edges of the bologna just crispy enough to give it bite. It smelled like school lunch and after-school cartoons. This was a sandwich that did not care what anyone thought. It was pizza-inspired, budget-friendly, and full of attitude. A little greasy? Sure. A little weird? Absolutely. But no one ever forgot their first one. But if bologna in a broiler felt like a stretch, get ready for the canned spread that showed up in lunchboxes, picnic baskets, and every pantry with a shelf of shame, and somehow stayed beloved. The bacon and peanut butter sandwich was one that caught our eyes the most. Crispy bacon paired with peanut butter sounded like a combination that could just work somehow. This was a no-brainer for Americans. If their left kidney is sustained by peanut butter, the right is sustained by bacon. Both together probably provide just the right amount of fuel to get through the day or a grueling 9-to-5 shift. A great condiment to go with this is unsweetened ketchup, because most ketchups today have artificial sweeteners. This isn't as popular as it used to be, but it hasn't declined enough in renown that it's that outlandish of an idea. Give it a try some weekend, you might be pleasantly surprised. Sautéed or caramelized onions provide just the right complementary flavor to the crispy bacon, while also not overloading your taste buds because of the peanut butter. So here's the part where it gets controversial. Whether a hot dog qualifies as a sandwich is still debated. But for the sake of this video, let's consider it one. I mean, technically, it fits the definition of a sandwich, meat between bread, but many people see it as its own category. Hot dogs have been a staple of American cuisine since the late 19th century and became popular with ballparks, cookouts, and summer fairs. Now, the modern hot dog has its origins in German sausages like the Frankfurter or Wiener, but Graham gave it her own twist and made it according to our likings. The best part? If you don't like mustard, she skipped out on it. Yeah, the classic hot dog is topped with mustard, ketchup, and relish, but it could be customized. In Chicago, hot dogs were famously topped with a combination of mustard, onions, pickles, tomatoes, sport peppers, and celery salt, never ketchup. For many families, the cornbread and molasses sandwich was a nostalgic, soul-satisfying meal. This humble sandwich takes us back to the Appalachian table, where cornbread was a daily staple, especially when times were tough. Cornbread, often considered a basic but hearty food, was a versatile option when money was scarce. If the cornbread was a little stale or leftover, all the better. It was perfect for slathering with rich molasses, which was often a pantry staple in many homes. The molasses added a rich sweetness that made the sandwich not just filling but comforting in its simplicity. Sometimes a little butter was added for extra indulgence, giving the bread a velvety texture that made each bite even more satisfying. While it might not have been a gourmet creation, it was a connection to simpler times when families used what they had and made do. Cornbread was cheap and easy to make, and molasses was an affordable sweetener. The combination of the hearty cornbread and the sweet molasses made it the perfect meal when the cupboard was bare. For many, it was a meal that provided both physical and emotional comfort. Nothing fancy, but it worked. It wasn't about the ingredients being luxurious. It was about making the most of what was available and taking pride in the simplicity of the dish. This sandwich wasn't just a meal. It was a reminder of resourcefulness, tradition, and making do with less. There is something dangerously comforting about mixing bacon grease with anything sweet, and that is exactly what bacon and apple butter on white bread was. You take crisp, salty bacon, still warm from the skillet, and press it into a slice of soft white bread that has been generously smeared with apple butter. That is it. No lettuce, no cheese, no rules. The combination was 100% homemade magic. It tasted like fall mornings, cast iron skillets, and someone's grandma telling you not to eat too fast. Apple butter gave it this rich, spiced flavor that clung to your mouth just long enough for the bacon to come crashing through. It was smoky. It was sweet. It was not trying to impress anyone. The real win here was in how it reused leftovers. If breakfast was done, and you had a few stray strips of bacon and a jar of apple butter on hand, this sandwich practically made itself. The kind of thing you whipped up while the coffee was still brewing. Maybe it never made it to a diner menu, but it made it to enough hearts to matter. And speaking of sandwiches that mattered, let us talk about the skyscraper of cold cuts that ruled every diner plate with a toothpick flag on top. If you've ever had an egg salad sandwich, you might think you know what's coming with the chopped egg and vinegar sandwich. But this isn't your average egg salad. Instead of the usual mayonnaise, this sandwich relied on vinegar or mustard to give the eggs that tangy kick. Hard-boiled eggs were chopped up, mixed with the vinegar or mustard, and spread between two slices of bread. It wasn't the most luxurious meal, but it was cheap, filling, and had a sharp, tangy flavor that worked wonders. It was a makeshift egg salad, but it did the job when you needed something simple and satisfying. The vinegar or mustard added just enough zing to make the sandwich stand out. And while this might have been a favorite for some, the next sandwich is all about taking those beans you've got left over and turning them into something great. The scrapple sandwich is exactly what the name suggests: fried slices of scrapple on bread. Traditionally, this sandwich would be sliced and prepared in a skillet, under a thick layer of eggs. It definitely became popular around the Maryland to New York district, but the recipe itself is properly ancient. An 1853 extract from a cookbook advises using pork that wouldn't be suitable for sausage. It was also popular for its health benefits. It can be made in a variety of ways, and some people include crispy cabbage on top and make it into a waffle with mayo. Mix and match and see what works best for you. Maybe you'll find something worth sharing. But for now, the scrapple sandwich can only be something you create. With its popularity last seen in the mid-1850s, this sandwich is something that we can only find in old extracts now. Deli classics have always been Graham's specialty, and the corned beef sandwich was no exception. This one started out as a nod to the traditions of Eastern European cuisine and became popular in the United States in the early 20th century. In case you're wondering about the name, corned beef comes from the curing process. Corned refers to the large grains of salt that are used to preserve the meat. This was a pretty simple beef sandwich with a hint of mustard, but its taste really spoke for itself. And it even made its way into pop culture by being frequently featured in TV shows, movies, etc. For example, in the film The Godfather, there's a memorable scene where a character is shown eating a corned beef sandwich. If you've seen the movie, I'm sure you remember it. Ham salad was the sandwich that crept into your life without warning and just stayed. It was never flashy, never demanding, but it had a way of showing up when you needed it most. Diced ham, usually the leftovers from Sunday dinner, got chopped fine and tossed with mayonnaise, sweet pickle relish, and maybe a squirt of yellow mustard or a spoonful of Miracle Whip if you were feeling wild. It was smooth, creamy, with just enough tang to make you wonder why you did not eat it more often. Spread it thick on soft white bread. Throw on a lettuce leaf if you're trying to be classy, and you had a sandwich that felt like summer picnics and small-town potlucks. It tasted like home. Like old Tupperware containers pulled from the fridge and packed into a picnic basket with a bag of chips and a slice of pie wrapped in foil. No one ever called it their favorite, but no one turned it down either. That is the magic of ham salad. It stayed in the background, steady and familiar. But not every sandwich played it safe. Some brought the heat, and maybe a little spice from south of the border. In the summer, when tomatoes were in season and fresh produce was at its peak, tomato and sugar sandwiches became a beloved choice. Thick slices of juicy, ripe tomatoes, sprinkled with sugar, were placed between slices of bread. It might sound odd, but the sweetness of the sugar balanced the tang of the tomatoes, making it an unexpectedly delicious combo. Some people even added a little mayonnaise to the mix for extra creaminess. This sandwich became a perfect treat, often eaten barefoot on the porch in the warmth of summer. It was simple and sweet, a perfect way to enjoy the bounty of the season without spending much. While it was certainly a summertime favorite, this combo is one of those meals that people today may never quite understand. But if you think this sweet and savory duo is odd, the next sandwich is even more unconventional. Most of the lovers of chicken salad and grape sandwiches dwindled a lot over the years, and now it is just a memory. No one does comfort food better than Americans, and the iconic potato chips and cheese sandwich is proof. People would grab cheddar or mozzarella cheese and a packet of Frito-Lays or a can of Pringles and get busy at the table but not in the kitchen. Reason being, this was one of those 10-minute dishes that took absolutely no effort or time to make, like instant noodles. Barbecue-flavored chips would be preferred, because they added a secondary flavor, but all kinds were used and the crunch was just to die for. In the 1970s, chips like Pringles were getting more and more popular in America, and that made it even easier for this to take center stage. What would follow in the decades after was a growing concern for health, and people stopped making their favorite potato chips and cheese sandwiches, but we would love a 70s plate. If there's one sandwich you can never go wrong with, it's the old-fashioned grilled cheese sandwich. This one is the epitome of comfort food, and Grandma's version was a childhood favorite. Even the pickiest eaters used to beg for this one. So this one became popular during the Great Depression era, when we had to make do with three of the most common ingredients in our pantries: bread, cheese, and butter. Now, some of us used to get creative with our grilled cheese by adding extras like sliced tomatoes, ham, bacon, or even pickles. But this one was best enjoyed simple and plain. Oh, and let's not forget, it tastes even better when paired with a warm bowl of tomato soup. Before burgers and fries, grilled cheese and tomato soup used to be the ultimate food combo of our dreams. The best part? Most cheese sandwiches are vegetarian and can easily be made vegan by adjusting the type of cheese and oil. Creamed chipped beef on toast, or as anyone who ever served in the military will tell you, SOS. No, not a cry for help, though it looked like one. This was dried beef, shredded and stirred into a thick, milky white sauce with a bit of pepper and sometimes a touch of Worcestershire if you were fancy. Then it got spooned over toast, or biscuits, or whatever bread you had. It was a direct descendant of World War II rations. But by the 1970s, it had made its way into American homes, school cafeterias, and greasy spoon diners across the country. It was salty. It was creamy. It looked like a mistake, but somehow it kept getting made and loved. It was affordable, filling, and tasted better than it had any right to. Parents made it because it used cheap pantry ingredients. Diners served it with coffee refills. Kids ate it because they did not know any better, then grew up craving it again. It might not be pretty, but it is unforgettable. Still, not everything on this list is heavy. Some sandwiches were just simple, clever ways to use what was left on the breakfast table, and a little sweet on the side. When it comes to using leftovers in the most creative way, the spaghetti sandwich is a prime example of resourcefulness. After a hearty meal of spaghetti, rather than letting any leftover noodles go to waste, many families would stuff the cold or reheated pasta between slices of bread, creating a sandwich that was both filling and practical. The beauty of the spaghetti sandwich lay in its simplicity. There was no need for additional ingredients, just pasta and sauce on bread, and that was enough to provide sustenance. Whether it was enjoyed cold or warmed up in a skillet, this sandwich made use of what was already prepared, turning leftovers into a whole new meal. It was a quick fix for lunch or dinner when funds were tight, and cooking from scratch wasn't an option. For many, the spaghetti sandwich wasn't just a meal, it was a way to stretch food further, especially during times of scarcity. The bread helped soak up the sauce, while the pasta provided a comforting, hearty filling. It wasn't a sandwich you'd see at a fancy restaurant, but it served its purpose well, turning a simple leftover dish into a satisfying, portable meal. It's the kind of meal that may sound odd to some, but to those who lived through hard times, it was a tasty and practical solution. When you needed to fill up and didn't have time or money for anything else, the spaghetti sandwich got the job done. And if you think spaghetti on bread is a simple fix, wait until you see what's next. Ham and banana sandwiches are less digestible both literally and figuratively than most of the list, but they actually worked quite well. The trick was in how you sliced them, because if the banana slices were fat and thick while the ham was thin, you would have a really overly sweet sandwich. Meanwhile, if you did the opposite, then you would have a mushy sandwich that did not have any real flavor. If you did get the proportions right, and most people did after their first few tries, then you had a 70s DIY delicacy with simple ingredients. It made sense why most people did not know how to make a good one, because it was not common. People who lived in other decades hated fruit and meat mixes of savory dishes, but they had a lot more room to make an impression with the crowd in the 70s. Maybe people felt very tropical for a decade? The sandwich would be quite an interesting addition in menus today. Remember what chilly days at Graham's called for back in the day? If you guessed hot turkey sandwich, you're absolutely right. This sandwich was another one of Grandma's delicious ways of using up leftover turkey from Thanksgiving. This sandwich featured slices of tender turkey served hot, often open-faced, with a generous ladle of rich, savory gravy poured over the top. Sounds delicious, right? Grandma made her hot turkey sandwich special with the gravy. Whether she made it from scratch with turkey drippings or used a trusted recipe, the rich gravy soaked into the bread, making each bite juicy and flavorful. She knew that nothing went to waste, and the hot turkey sandwich was a delicious way to make the most of those leftovers. The club sandwich was never shy about making an entrance. This was the sandwich equivalent of wearing a tuxedo to a barbecue. Triple layered, cut diagonally, and always served with a cocktail toothpick jabbed right through the middle like a victory flag, the classic clubhouse was a masterclass in controlled chaos. You had turkey, ham, and bacon stacked with lettuce, tomato, and mayonnaise on white toast, then doubled up like it had something to prove. One bite, and you got the salty crunch of bacon, the cool snap of lettuce, the savory chew of ham, and that creamy mayo keeping everything glued together. It was tall. It was filling. It was an edible tower of American lunch pride. You could find it at diners, roadside motels, airport cafes, and your Aunt Linda's house on a Sunday afternoon. No one ever finished a club sandwich without looking like they'd just solved a puzzle. Picking it up was half the battle. Eating it cleanly? Impossible. But satisfying? Always. This was the sandwich you ordered when you wanted to feel like you were doing something important. And while this one wore its sandwich royalty crown proudly, the next one took a completely different route, turning cheap lunch meat into the closest thing we ever got to pizza on a bun. The apple and mayo sandwich might seem like a strange combination, but it was a surprisingly popular choice during tough times when ingredients were scarce and creativity in the kitchen was key. Sliced apples, typically tart varieties, were paired with creamy mayonnaise between slices of bread. The sweetness of the apples contrasted with the rich, tangy mayo, creating a unique and unexpected flavor profile. It wasn't the type of sandwich you would find in any deli, but it became a go-to option for those looking for something quick and different. The apples, which were relatively inexpensive and often readily available, provided a bit of freshness and texture, while the mayo added a comforting creaminess that tied the whole thing together. The apple and mayo sandwich was especially popular during times of rationing or when fresh produce was hard to come by, offering a rare chance to enjoy a sweet, crunchy bite. While it wasn't a culinary masterpiece, it was a meal that worked with what was available, perfect for those on tight budgets. The sandwich wasn't fancy, but it had an undeniable charm. For many, it was an odd but delicious treat that felt like a luxury in a world where simple ingredients were used to make the most of every meal. And if you thought the apple and mayo sandwich was unexpected, just wait until the next sandwich, where another quirky combination takes center stage with a surprising flavor twist. Cooked chicken livers mixed with onions and spices came together to create the chicken liver sandwich. Now, out of all the ones on the list, This one has probably stood the test of time the most rigidly. You'll still find it in the odd bistro or cafe here and there. Preparing it is a bit of work, but for those who want to expand their sandwich arsenal, this is a worthy addition. You'll need celery, red onions, curry powder, salt and pepper, and lettuce of your choice. Once you've mixed your meat with your vegetables and spices, it's time to get cooking in a 350-degree skillet and mix well. Once it's all ready, assemble your sandwich and see just why this was so popular around the 1940-1960s. When it comes to sandwiches, only a few were as satisfying as the roast beef sandwich. So, many sandwiches were originally created as a clever way to repurpose leftovers, and this one was no exception. Roast beef sandwiches often started with leftovers from Sunday dinner. The Sunday roast was a time-honored tradition, and any extra beef was used to make delicious sandwiches for lunch the next day. In 1900, the dish was described by the Washington Post as unattractive and as a tired ark in a gravy flood. However, it gained popularity in the coming years when Grandma decided to take matters into her own hands, and by 1931, some critics even went as far as to describe it as a true taste of South Dakota. The bread for Grandma's roast beef sandwich was often homemade, and boy did she know how to dress it up. Whether it was a dollop of horseradish sauce, a spread of mustard, or a smear of mayonnaise, Gram knew exactly what it needed, and if we got lucky, she even snuck in a slice of cheese. Elvis did not invent the grilled peanut butter and banana sandwich, but he sure made it famous. This was a sandwich with soul. It started simple: 2 slices of soft white bread, a thick slather of peanut butter, and banana slices lined up like records on a shelf. Then, just when you thought it was done, someone threw it on a griddle with butter until it crisped and caramelized into something magical. The peanut butter melted, the banana got warm and gooey, and the outside toasted to golden brown perfection. It was sweet, salty, sticky, and just a little over the top, like every good memory from a Saturday morning. Whether you were 5 or 50, this sandwich hit all the right notes. Some people added honey, others tossed in bacon, and a few adventurous souls even threw in some cinnamon. But the classic version stood tall, proud, and a little indulgent. It was the kind of sandwich your aunt made when she wanted to spoil you without breaking the bank. It filled you up, slowed you down, and made you feel like life was okay, if only for a moment. But if you thought Elvis had taste, wait until you see what happens when Spam and pineapple get tossed into the same sandwich and actually make sense. You might be familiar with peanut butter and banana, but how about a banana and mayo sandwich? It's a Southern oddity that, over time, turned into a tradition. The combination of ripe banana slices and mayonnaise might sound strange, but there's something about the sweet, slippery texture of the banana paired with the creamy tang of mayo that works. It was a cheap, easy-to-make sandwich that satisfied a sweet tooth while also providing some sustenance. It's not the kind of sandwich you'll find at a deli, but it was a comfort food for many who grew up with it. Over time, it became a quirky favorite, one of those sandwiches that you either love or have no interest in trying at all. But whether you loved it or not, it's hard to forget such a memorable and unexpected combination. And while the banana and mayo sandwich might be a Southern classic, things are about to get even tangier with the next sandwich. Sardine and mustard sandwiches are as basic as they sound and much better than you might initially give them credit for. Be realistic and think about a post-Depression era America where a lot of neighborhoods and homes were still reeling from the effects. Dollars could buy a bit more and went back to their usual strength, but everything was a bit touch and go for a while, and dishes like sardine and mustard sandwiches were the cure. Even more attractive than the taste was the price of this beauty, because for about $1.50 you had yourself a solid meal. Many labor workers, like your friendly neighborhood forklift or dock workers, might remember eating these during their lunch breaks. People would usually spice it up with other vegetables, toppings, and peppers to make a proper feast out of a cheap thrill. And we would like to join the fun too. Liverwurst might not be everyone's cup of tea, but for those who loved it, there was nothing quite like a liverwurst sandwich. So, liverwurst, or liver sausage, has German roots and is a staple in many European countries. The name liverwurst comes from the German words Leber, which means liver, and Wurst, which means sausage. This one was also made with rye bread and was a common street food in the streets of New York. Grandma gave it a home-like feel by using homemade bread and using fresh veggies and toppings like mustard, pickles, or onions. Grandma knew that liverwurst sandwiches were a bit of a specialty, something that not everyone would appreciate. But for those who did, it was a real treat. The cheese dream was the grilled cheese's show-off cousin, open-faced, broiled, and served hot enough to burn the roof of your mouth if you were not careful. It started with a single slice of white bread, toasted just enough to hold its own. On top went a generous pile of shredded cheese. Cheddar was the go-to, but sometimes you got American or a mystery blend from a bag. Then came the real twist. A tomato slice right on top, dusted with paprika for color and just a little kick. Under the broiler it went, bubbling and browning until it looked like something straight off the back of a recipe card. It was humble, sure, but it had flair. You would see these at lunch counters, Sunday night dinners, and school lunch trays where the budget was tight but the flavor still mattered. The tomato added a bit of freshness. The paprika made it feel just fancy enough. And the cheese? Well, that was always the star. It was a small thing, but it delivered big. The cheese dream was a one-slice wonder, a reminder that sometimes the best sandwiches don't even have a top. But if you wanted something a little more refined, a little cooler, and straight from the country club, the next sandwich knew exactly how to dress for the occasion. Pickles come in pairs with olives, so it is only right to mention cream cheese and olive sandwiches next. Cream cheese was an ingredient that was already a staple in many American homes because of its popularity in desserts around the 1970s. Olives are, well, olives, and if you do not have a bottle always ready to go, you need to reevaluate your grocery shopping list for this month. Mixing the two made both substantially better, like those power-ups Iron Man gets whenever he puts on a bulkier suit. If people felt really fancy, they would put the olives on the stove for a while and have them fried. Not only was it great on its own, but people also did not stop at just frying. Both of them made for really awesome toppings on meat-based sandwiches. We would not mind seeing more olives on our plate today for sure. They are a classic we feel work in any era. Elvis Presley wasn't the only one who loved a peanut butter and bacon sandwich. The combo of crispy, salty bacon and creamy, rich peanut butter created a high-protein, energy-packed sandwich that was a favorite for anyone in need of a quick and filling meal. It's easy to see why this sandwich caught on. It balanced savory and sweet, crunchy and creamy. The bacon gave it that satisfying crunch, while the peanut butter added a smooth richness. It wasn't the healthiest option, but when you're working with a tight budget and even tighter food supplies, it was a treat that gave you the energy to keep going. Not only was this a cheap meal, but it was also indulgent in a way that made you forget about how hard times really were. The combination of these two ingredients might have seemed strange, but it worked, and it worked well. But if you're craving something a little lighter, something that came before the age of bacon and peanut butter, the next sandwich on our list might be just what you need. The salami and cheese sandwich was another deli favorite. This is another Italian classic. Salami and cheese sandwiches have roots in Italian cuisine, where cured meats like salami were often paired with cheeses in traditional sandwiches. Salami paired well with various cheeses, including provolone, Swiss, or cheddar. So grandma just used whatever was on hand. But for a true salami and cheese sandwich, crusty Italian ciabatta is a must, and it's even better when it's homemade with love. Now salami has been around since ancient Rome, but it became popular in sandwiches during the 20th century as Italian-American communities spread their culinary traditions. This sandwich wasn't really the healthiest choice out there, but Graham loved spoiling us every now and then, and there was no better treat than this bad boy. There is nothing tidy about a sloppy Joe, and that is the whole point. These school cafeteria icons had one mission: to hit like a flavor bomb and leave a trail behind. Tangy ground beef cooked with tomato paste, onions, and whatever seasoning the lunch lady felt like using that day. Scooped in a steaming pile onto soft hamburger buns that were usually a little too small. You would take one bite, and the filling would slide out the other side like it was trying to escape. Your hands? Covered. Your tray? A disaster. Your smile? Huge. They were sweet, salty, savory, and just chaotic enough to make lunch feel like a party. Even the name sounded like something you should not be allowed to say in class. Sloppy Joes were not reserved for fancy moments. They were served with plastic forks and half a chocolate milk carton. But they became legendary. Maybe it was because they tasted like comfort food mixed with rebellion. Or maybe it was just the fact that no one ever got through one without needing extra napkins. Either way, it earned its place in the Sandwich Hall of Fame. But what if I told you there was a sandwich out there that combined egg, gravy, and a hamburger bun and somehow made it work? If you've ever opened a can of sardines, you know it has a distinct, strong flavor, one that isn't for everyone. But during the Great Depression, a canned sardine and mayo sandwich was a common lunch that stretched a tight budget. Sardines were affordable, packed with protein, and could sit on the shelf for ages. They weren't just easy to find, they were easy to store. The fish was mashed up with mayonnaise, often with a little bit of onion for extra bite, then slathered between slices of bread. Though the flavor might have been an acquired taste, it was a filling meal that kept hunger at bay. And with the mayo adding creaminess, it was surprisingly comforting. While sardines may not be the most glamorous fish, they certainly played an important role in feeding families during tough times. You might think this sandwich is a strange mix, but it's actually a great way to get protein when the pantry's running low. And while sardines gave you that fishy flavor, it was about to get a little more sweet and creamy with the next sandwich on our list. If you've ever walked the streets of downtown New York, I'm sure you're familiar with the infamous pastrami on rye. If your grandma's from the Big Apple, chances are her recipe is highly regarded. This sandwich became a staple in Jewish delis in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, thanks to Eastern European immigrants. This one just featured an old-fashioned slice of pastrami on rye bread and a dollop of mustard. Grandma knew that when it came to sandwiches, sometimes less is more, and pastrami on rye is the perfect example of that. But hey, don't forget no pastrami on rye is complete without a pickle on the side. The tartness of a dill pickle or the sweetness of a bread and butter pickle is the perfect contrast to the savory pastrami. The meatball sub is the kind of sandwich that's meant to be messy. The meatball sub has its origins in Italian-American cuisine. While meatballs are a traditional Italian dish, the meatball sub became popular in the U.S. as Italian immigrants put an American twist to it. We're talking juicy meatballs, marinara sauce topped with melted cheese on a long, crusty roll. Yeah, it doesn't really get more American than this. What makes or breaks this sandwich is the sauce, and Grandma knew it all too well. The sauce had to be the right balance of sweetness and acidity, and of course, the bread had to be sturdy enough to hold everything together. It's the kind of sandwich that you need 2 hands to eat, and maybe a napkin or 2, but it's worth every bite. It's a classic comfort food that never goes out of style. Now we are talking classic. Corned beef and coleslaw on seeded rye is one of those sandwiches that knew how to make an entrance without raising its voice. You would find it wrapped in wax paper at your local deli, or sitting proud on a tray next to a pickle spear and a bag of chips. The corned beef was thin sliced, but packed with punch. Salty, tender, and just fatty enough to remind you this was not diet food. Then came the slaw. Not too creamy, not too dry, with just the right crunch to cut through the richness of the meat. Pile that high between 2 slices of seeded rye, sturdy, peppery, with that classic bite, and you had something special. This was the kind of sandwich that told you to sit down and take your time. It did not rush. It did not play games. It was the kind of thing you ordered when you wanted to feel like an adult, even if you were still wearing platform shoes and listening to disco on cassette. Deli counters made legends, and this one was a heavy hitter. But if corned beef was too bold for your taste, there was always its milder cousin, the quiet, sweet-talking ham salad that somehow became a staple without anyone noticing. When times were tough and budgets were tight, the potted meat and pickle sandwich became a popular choice for many families. Potted meat, often deviled ham or canned potted meat, was an affordable and long-lasting option that could be stored on the shelf for months. It was a quick fix for lunch or dinner, providing the protein needed to get through the day without breaking the bank. The key to this sandwich was the addition of pickles, which added a sharp, tangy crunch that perfectly complemented the rich, salty meat. The pickles cut through the richness of the potted meat, bringing balance and an extra layer of flavor to the sandwich. Combined with the soft bread, it created a hearty, satisfying meal. While the sandwich might not have been gourmet, it was practical, affordable, and filling. Potted meat, though not glamorous, was a staple in many households during difficult times because of its long shelf life and low cost. The pickles, often a pantry staple, brought a much-needed contrast to the meat, giving the sandwich a bit of freshness and bite. This sandwich was a great example of how people made do with what they had, using simple ingredients to create a meal that could feed a family without breaking the bank. And while the potted meat and pickle combo served its purpose well, things are about to get a little more savory and filling with the next sandwich. As grim as the name might sound, peanut butter combined with mayo was quite a hit back in the day. In America, kids would often have this at 7 a.m. before school as breakfast they could easily put together. The sandwich was especially popular in the 30s to 60s as it was cheap and filling. Much like other sandwiches in the list, the peanut butter and mayo combination was also a product of the Great Depression. The mayo provided generous proteins that would pair well with fats from the peanut butter. In a time of financial instability, people found this sandwich to be a great way to ensure intake of important nutrients. As financial situations improved in America, this sandwich was replaced by newer and rather better tasting options. If you've ever walked the streets of downtown New York, I'm sure you're familiar with the infamous pastrami on rye. If your grandma's from the Big Apple, chances are her recipe is highly regarded. This sandwich became a staple in Jewish delis in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, thanks to Eastern European immigrants. This one just featured an old-fashioned slice of pastrami on rye bread and a dollop of mustard. Grandma knew that when it came to sandwiches, sometimes less is more, and pastrami on rye is the perfect example of that. But hey, don't forget no pastrami on rye is complete without a pickle on the side. The tartness of a dill pickle or the sweetness of a bread and butter pickle is the perfect contrast to the savory pastrami. Imagine being 8 years old and opening your lunchbox to find chopped olive and cream cheese on pumpernickel. Either your mom was ahead of her time or she found an old cocktail recipe card and just went with it. This sandwich was salty, tangy, creamy, and somehow kind of grown up. You had green olives chopped so fine they could sneak into your taste buds before your brain caught on, mixed with cream cheese until it was a spread so thick it stuck to the knife like it had a mission. All of that smeared onto a slice of deep dark pumpernickel that practically demanded you respect it. It was not flashy, it was not sweet, and no kid was trading their cookie for it, but it had an edge, the kind of flavor that got better the more you chewed. Somewhere along the way, this party appetizer snuck into lunchboxes, Tupperware, and even a few kitchen counters at 2 in the morning. It was strange, but it made sense. The 70s were weird like that. Spreads were suddenly sandwiches and finger food was fair game. Of course, if you thought cold spreads were wild, wait until you see what happens when tuna salad goes face-to-face with a broiler. When the budget was tight and even jam or jelly was out of reach, butter and sugar sandwiches came to the rescue. It was as simple as it sounds, a thick layer of butter spread on white bread, then topped with a generous sprinkle of sugar. For many, this became the go-to treat, especially during the Depression. It was sweet, satisfying, and didn't require much in terms of ingredients. The butter added richness, and the sugar gave it a touch of sweetness, making it feel like a real dessert, even if it was just a way to fill the stomach when times were tough. The best part? It was incredibly cheap to make, and you didn't have to go hunting for expensive ingredients. Families would often have this as a snack or even as a light dessert to end the day. Despite how simple it seems, there's something comforting about its humble sweetness. But as simple as butter and sugar may be, it's about to get even simpler with the next sandwich on our list. The head cheese sandwich in basic terms is just slices of head cheese, which is a cold cut made from meat from the head of a calf or pig on bread. If you'd rather not the head, then you can also use trimmings. And in terms of assembly, this resembles more of a charcuterie board than anything else. It's packed to the brim with vegetables, spices, and other aromatics. Though still, the entire head of an animal can be a bit of a daunting task for any chef. Once you've got your bread toasted and your spread spreaded, add your spices and vegetables and the hog's head cheese and assemble accordingly. If you actually manage to pull it off, this is definitely a vintage worth getting your hands dirtier than usual. You can't have a conversation about classic grandma sandwiches without bringing up the egg salad sandwich. This sandwich started out as an economical way of using up extra eggs. Eggs were a budget-friendly protein source, and this sandwich with just a few ingredients from the pantry. This one also used mayo to bind the sandwich together, but some grandmas added a bit of mustard for a tangy kick. This was a post-Easter favorite, as after the holiday ended, there were plenty of hard-boiled eggs on hand, and of course Graham didn't let anything go to waste. You can make this one yourself with some store-bought egg salad, but it won't taste the same as it did back in the day. The patty melt was not just a sandwich, it was a lifestyle. It belonged to truck stops, corner booths, and places where the waitress calls you hon. Start with a beef patty, not too thick, not too thin, grilled until the edges charred just enough. Then pile on caramelized onions so sweet they practically melt, and drop a couple of slices of Swiss cheese on top until it oozes over like lava. But the crown jewel? That rye bread, buttered and toasted right on the griddle. It soaked up everything. The beefy drippings, the onion sweetness, the crispy edges of the cheese. Every bite was a perfect mix of crunchy and gooey, salty and buttery. You were not just eating a sandwich, you were biting into pure diner energy. People had this at lunch and still talked about it at dinner. If your parents ever made this at home, you were one of the lucky ones. And if not, you probably still remember your first time trying one and realizing a sandwich could actually stop time. But not every sandwich needed to be hot off the grill. Some came cold, weirdly fancy, and straight from the pages of a church cookbook. If you've never tried a raw onion sandwich, it's one of those meals that'll stick with you, for better or worse. Sliced raw onions, slathered with a bit of mustard or mayo, tucked between two slices of bread. It wasn't gourmet, but it was a working man's lunch that packed a punch. Onions were cheap, easy to store, and filled you up. The mustard or mayo added some tang and creaminess, but the star of the show was the onion. Not only was it a strong-flavored, inexpensive option, but it was also a great way to keep your hunger at bay until your next meal. Though its pungent scent often lingered long after the meal was finished, it didn't matter when food was scarce. For many families, raw onion sandwiches were a quick fix that provided the sustenance they needed to get through the day. But if you think this is as bold as it gets, just wait until you hear about the next sandwich. Olives might not make a comeback anytime soon in today's world, but they will return on the list with egg and olive sandwiches. Like we said, olives were starting to get really hot as the ideal sandwich topping. Adaptable, flexible, and cheap is all you want out of an accessory to your sandwich. Like those fancy earrings that go perfect with your dress, olives and eggs went together like a Cupid-certified match made in heaven. People went wild around the mid-1970s for hard-boiled eggs and salted olives in their sandwich, green or black. Black olives got a bit more traction with eggs though, whereas greens synergized better with peanut butter. Would you ever try a sandwich that consists only of an egg and a fruit? By the way, you did know olives are fruits, right? Let's kick things off with a classic that's got a bit of a spicy kick: deviled ham spread. If you have memories of peeking into Grandma's pantry, I'm sure you remember spotting a can of deviled ham sitting quietly on the shelf at all times. This spicy spread has been around since the 1800s. The term deviled refers to the practice of adding spices to meat, and that's where this spread got its name from. Deviled ham is basically the spicier cousin of Spam. While Spam is known for its basic pork goodness, deviled ham takes it up a notch with a spicy kick and a whole lot of flavor. Back in the day, this spread was a go-to for quick and easy sandwiches. Graham would slather it on homemade bread or serve it up on crackers as a savory snack. If you were a regular at lunch counters in the 1970s, there was one cold cut that had a mysterious charm: pickle and pimento loaf. It had a look that was hard to ignore. A pale pink meat dotted with bright green pickle bits and tiny flecks of red pimento, like a mosaic made by someone who really loved sandwiches. It came sliced thin from behind the deli glass, slapped between white bread with a dab of mayonnaise and wrapped in wax paper with a soda on the side. You did not question it. You just ate it. The flavor? Tangy, savory, and weirdly sweet, but not in a bad way. It had the texture of bologna, the bite of pickle, and the color scheme of a Christmas tree. For some reason, it vanished from most grocery shelves by the end of the decade. Maybe tastes changed, or maybe we just stopped putting pickles inside our meat. But back then, it was an easy go-to, a bit of fun, and a total conversation starter if you pulled it out during lunch break. Of course, if you thought that sandwich was messy looking, just wait until we dive into the one that was literally impossible to eat without getting sauce all over your hands and loving it. If you've ever had creamed corn, you know how rich and flavorful it can be. Now imagine spreading it onto bread for a sandwich. That's exactly what the creamed corn sandwich was. Canned creamed corn, drained just enough to prevent it from being too watery, was spooned onto toast or bread. It was messy, yes, but it was also delicious. The sweetness and creaminess of the corn paired perfectly with the bread, creating a satisfying and hearty meal. It wasn't the kind of sandwich you'd take to a picnic, but it was a beloved comfort food in many households during lean times. Whether it was a quick lunch or a dinner replacement, creamed corn made it easy to put together a meal that was both filling and affordable. The messiness just added to its charm, and it was a sandwich that brought a taste of sweetness to an otherwise tough time. If you think creamed corn on bread is indulgent, wait until you hear about the next sandwich that combines salty and sweet in an unexpected way. Liverwurst might not be everyone's cup of tea, but for those who loved it, there was nothing quite like a liverwurst sandwich. So, liverwurst, or liver sausage, has German roots and is a staple in many European countries. The name liverwurst comes from the German words Leber, which means liver, and Wurst, which means sausage. This one was also made with rye bread and was a common street food in the streets of New York. Grandma gave it a home-like feel by using homemade bread and using fresh veggies and toppings like mustard, pickles, or onions. Grandma knew that liverwurst sandwiches were a bit of a specialty, something that not everyone would appreciate. But for those who did, it was a real treat. Here's another French classic that's a bit different from the rest of the sandwiches on the list. The Monte Cristo sandwich is a variation of the French croque monsieur. In simpler terms, it's a classic grilled ham and cheese sandwich. To make a great Monte Cristo, the sandwich had to be fried just right, and unlike most, this was dipped in egg batter and fried. The name was inspired by Alexandre Dumas' novel The Count of Monte Cristo, and this gave it a luxurious touch. If you have French ancestors, you likely have fond memories of eating this at family brunches. Sometimes the oddest combinations end up being the most memorable, and the pickle and peanut butter sandwich is one of those strange pairings that gained a cult following. The combination of creamy peanut butter and crunchy pickles might seem bizarre at first, but it worked. Whether you prefer dill pickles or sweet ones, they added a crunch and tang that complemented the rich, nutty flavor of the peanut butter. It was a sandwich that took a little getting used to, but once you did, it became oddly addictive. The saltiness of the peanut butter paired perfectly with the sharpness of the pickles, making it a surprising yet satisfying snack or meal. It's the kind of sandwich that's hard to forget once you've tried it, and while it may not have been for everyone, it certainly had its fans. But if you think this combo is wild, things are about to get even more unusual with the next sandwich that's all about adding a little tangy bite. Shrimp salad rolls were the fancy cousin who only showed up at baby showers and bridal brunches, but when they did, they made sure you noticed. These sandwiches were served cold, creamy, and full of old-school charm. Chopped shrimp got mixed with mayonnaise, a little diced celery for crunch, and maybe a squeeze of lemon juice if the recipe came from someone who read food magazines. The mix got spooned onto a buttered roll, soft, pillowy, and lightly toasted if you were lucky. It was rich but light, simple but elevated. You were not scarfing it down with fries and soda. No, this one came with iced tea in a glass and maybe a napkin folded just right. It was the kind of sandwich that made you sit a little straighter. Perfect for luncheons, community cookbooks, and any moment where finger foods and floral plates were involved. But here is the thing, it was good, really good. The shrimp brought just enough sweetness. The celery kept it from being too heavy, and the bread soaked it all in without falling apart. It was a sandwich that whispered luxury in a decade where not much else did. And if shrimp salad was for special occasions, the next sandwich took something sacred, Thanksgiving dinner, and made it work any day of the week. You have not seen experimental until you have seen a tuna and apple sandwich. Exactly what it sounds like and worse in reality than in your imagination, a tuna salad mixed with chopped apple slices on white bread. Yes, that is literally the entire concept. And no matter what the fusion food crowd tries to say, we are not trying it or buying into the hype. If only to satisfy the curiosity inside us and scratch that must-try everything itch, would we want this back. But strangely, people in the 70s had the opposite opinion. Cans of Pink Lady tuna and farmers market apples were apparently their idea of a good meal back then. Do you think they were onto something? Maybe we are jumping the gun and should take a note out of their book about being open to new tastes. When food was scarce, nothing went to waste, and the leftover bean sandwich is the perfect example of how resourceful families could be. Whether you had baked beans, pintos, or navy beans left from a previous meal, they made the perfect filling for a sandwich. The beans were mashed up and spread between slices of bread, turning them into a hearty meal that was both filling and cost-effective. While onions could be added for a little extra flavor, this sandwich was great in its simplest form. It didn't require any fancy ingredients, just what you had left in the fridge. The beans added protein and substance, making it a satisfying meal that could get you through a long day. This sandwich wasn't about perfection. It was about making the most of what you had and turning leftovers into something practical. It was the kind of meal that didn't need much to make it taste good. So, while leftover beans might not have been the highlight of the dinner table, they certainly played an important role when it came time to put together a quick lunch or snack. But if you think beans on bread are a clever solution, the next sandwich might just have you rethinking your idea of what makes a satisfying meal. Let's have a full circle moment with another sandwich that made sure leftovers didn't go to waste. Grandma's cold meatloaf sandwich was one of those dishes that tasted even better the next day. Meatloaf has been a staple in American kitchens since the Great Depression, when home cooks, mostly grandmas, stretched ground meat with fillers like breadcrumbs and oats. The sandwich became a popular way to make the leftovers go even further. Now, there were no strict rules for what went in this sandwich, so Gram put whatever she could find. You could use a variety of bread types, sourdough, rye, or even a soft white loaf, and top it with anything from ketchup and mustard to mayo, pickles, or even lettuce. You could even eat it cold, so it was really comfort food at its finest. There were many versions of this sandwich throughout the United States. Some meatloaves were sweetened with ketchup or brown sugar glaze, while others included a mix of ground beef, pork, and even veal. Way before anyone was throwing around the word fusion, people were already stuffing taco night into a sandwich roll and calling it lunch. The taco-inspired ground beef sandwich was a bold, brilliant mess of spicy ground beef seasoned with chili powder, cumin, and whatever was on hand. This was the 70s after all. If it came in a seasoning packet, it was probably fair game. The meat got piled high into a soft hoagie roll, topped with shredded cheddar, crisp lettuce, and sometimes a few sad tomatoes trying to keep up. Every bite was an explosion of salty heat and melty cheese. It was not clean, it was not elegant, but it was delicious. This was comfort food that was borrowed from the taco truck before taco trucks were even a thing. You could find it at school cafeterias, mom-and-pop diners, and even in the occasional backyard cookout where somebody decided to get creative. The bread soaked up all that seasoned grease, and somehow it just worked. You were not going to win any awards for presentation, but your taste buds would be too busy partying to care. And speaking of comfort food with attitude, the next sandwich on our list came straight from the king himself, and probably your aunt's frying pan. The lard and salt sandwich is one of those meals that perfectly embodies the ingenuity and resilience of families during the Great Depression, when food was scarce and every penny had to stretch. It was as simple as it sounds, just bread, lard, and a generous sprinkle of salt. The lard, which was a cheap and readily available source of fat, provided the sandwich with richness and moisture, while the salt helped enhance the flavor, making it more palatable. While it may not have been fancy, the lard and salt sandwich was a practical and filling option when other food was out of reach. Bread was often the most affordable ingredient, and lard was something many households had on hand, especially those who lived on farms where pigs were raised for their meat. This sandwich wasn't about gourmet dining, it was about making do with what was available. Despite the lack of variety, it kept hunger at bay and provided some much-needed energy during a time when food options were limited. It was a meal that could be whipped up quickly and was surprisingly satisfying. Though it may seem unappealing today, the lard and salt sandwich was an essential part of survival for many families. It's a reminder of how people used their resourcefulness to make meals out of the most basic ingredients. And while lard and salt might have filled many bellies, the next sandwich on our list brings together a different combination of simple ingredients to create a surprisingly satisfying meal. While we're talking about canned goods of the past, tuna salad sandwich was another one of Graham's specialties. So, canned tuna became all the rage during World War I, and it was the most common item on the food aisle. Grandma decided to twist it up and make it into a delicious sandwich that shaped all our childhoods. This one was a staple at picnics or simple lunches at the grandparents' house. The star of this sandwich was mayonnaise. Yeah, there was no tuna sandwich without this key ingredient. It bonded the tuna salad together and gave it its unique taste. Tuna salad sandwiches were the top choice for lunch because they were easy to prepare and didn't require any cooking. Grandma could whip up a batch in minutes, and let's be honest, we ate them just as quickly. When money was tight, creativity in the kitchen was essential, and the cabbage and mustard sandwich was a perfect example of making the most out of minimal ingredients. Boiled cabbage, often considered a humble vegetable, was paired with a dollop of yellow mustard, creating a simple yet satisfying filling between two slices of white bread. The cabbage provided a soft, mild base, while the mustard added a tangy kick that brought everything together. It wasn't the most exciting sandwich, but it served a purpose. It stretched pennies while still providing enough sustenance to get through the day. This sandwich became a staple for many who needed something filling, affordable, and easy to prepare. While it may have been basic, it was all about keeping things regular and using what you had available. The simplicity of this meal made it a go-to for families during tough times. And though the combination of cabbage and mustard may seem unusual, it was a practical meal when other options were limited. But if you think this sandwich is a little too simple, wait until you hear about the next one, which brings a bit of sweetness to the table. The turkey and cranberry sandwich was a straight-up post-holiday miracle. For decades, it was the unsung hero of Thanksgiving leftovers. But somewhere in the 1970s, it graduated. This was no longer just a thing you threw together on Black Friday. It became a deli menu regular, a cold-cut superstar. Thinly sliced roast turkey, piled high on hearty sandwich bread, usually with a swipe of mayonnaise or stuffing if you were lucky. Then came the game changer. Cranberry sauce. Not the fancy kind either. We are talking about the jiggly canned stuff that still held the shape of the tin. Spread it on thick and it brought a tart sweet punch that made the dry turkey sing. The contrast of savory meat with that jammy cranberry hit your mouth like a leftover-themed love letter. And the best part? You did not need a holiday to eat it. It was portable nostalgia, a bite-sized reminder of family dinners and paper plates stacked high. Every bite was warm, even when served cold. But if cranberry sauce and turkey were a love story, the next sandwich was more like a wild experiment that somehow worked, one that turned a jar of spread and a couple pickles into a lunchtime classic. New Orleans contributes to the sandwich table as well, and it's got a classic, the muffaletta. This one originated in New Orleans, Louisiana, when Italian cuisine was on the rise. The sandwich is named after the round, Sicilian-style bread it's traditionally made with, known as muffuletta bread. It's typically a large sandwich, so every time Grandma made one, it was a whole feast. Plus, let's not forget the olive salad it was paired with. Talk about Italian cuisine at its finest. If you ever want to try the OG muffaletta, Central Grocery and Deli in New Orleans is credited for its creation. Yeah, it remains a must-visit spot for this iconic sandwich. You know it is serious when your childhood lunch starts with a loud sizzle. Fried bologna and mustard was never supposed to be a star. It was just something people made when they ran out of ideas or groceries. But it had that wild card charm. Thick-cut bologna, the kind with that red plastic skin you had to peel off, got tossed on a hot skillet until it puffed like a mini volcano. It would curl at the edges, crispy and brown, and just when you thought it was done, it would start to sing. Slap that onto a slice of Wonder Bread, squeeze on yellow mustard like you mean it, and top it with another slice. No lettuce, no tomato, no distractions. This was the sandwich that knew what it was. It smelled like school lunches and weekend trips to the lake. It was cheap, easy, and always hit the spot. Nobody was trying to impress anybody with this. But somehow, it never let you down. The meat might have been humble, but it had attitude, and the mustard made sure it got noticed. Now, if that one felt like a memory, wait until we talk about the sandwich that brought the diner straight to your house, griddle grease and all. Last but certainly not least, we have the bologna sandwich. This one's still popular and never really vanished from Grandma's lunch table. Bologna, or bologna, originally hails from Bologna, Italy, where a similar sausage called mortadella is made. Of course, America has its own simplified version. A classic bologna sandwich usually included slices of bologna, white bread, and a slather of mustard or mayonnaise. But some of our grandmas added cheese or pickles for some extra flavor. This sandwich became a lunchbox favorite in the mid-20th century, particularly during the 1950s and 1960s, since it was light on the pockets. In American slang, it's called the bologna sandwich, and the word means something nonsensical or silly, which refers to the inexpensive and playful nature of the sandwich. This one was so famous that country singer Jimmy Dean even wrote a song about it called Bologna. Our grandmas loved the song as much as they loved whipping this one up for us. So, did any of these classic grandma sandwiches stir up tasty memories? If so, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and let's keep those memories alive. The grapefruit and sugar sandwich is a unique creation that came about during times of wartime rationing, especially in Florida, where grapefruits were abundant. During the period when fresh fruit was hard to come by and people were making do with what they had, this sandwich became a surprising treat. The process was simple. Segments of tart grapefruit were placed between slices of soft bread and generously sprinkled with sugar. The sweetness of the sugar helped to balance out the sharp, tangy flavor of the grapefruit, creating a sandwich that was both refreshing and satisfying. While it might sound unusual today, this combination provided a way to enjoy citrus without the need for expensive or hard-to-find ingredients. The sandwich was especially popular in Florida, but spread northward as families across the country sought ways to make the most of their limited resources. It wasn't about luxury, it was about making do with what you could find. The grapefruit added a rare burst of freshness, something that was much appreciated when fresh produce was often scarce. Whether eaten as a snack or a simple dessert, this sandwich was a quick and easy way to incorporate fruit into the diet without spending too much. The grapefruit and sugar sandwich wasn't for everyone, but for those who grew up with it, it's a nostalgic reminder of how inventive people could be when food was hard to come by. But if you think this sweet and tangy creation is odd, wait until you see the next sandwich on our list, where the flavor combination gets even more surprising. Deviled ham sandwiches were not for the faint of heart. They came with a kick and a scent that announced their presence the moment you unwrapped the wax paper. Ground ham mixed with spicy mustard, paprika, and seasonings that somehow always felt a bit mischievous, packed between slices of white or rye bread. It was meat with an attitude. The kind of sandwich that either made your eyes light up or your nose crinkle in confusion. Popularized by the little Underwood cans, deviled ham was both a pantry staple and a school lunch wild card. It had bite, it had heat, and it came with just enough mystery to make you wonder what exactly deviled meant. These sandwiches were strong in taste, smell, and opinion. Some kids loved them, others traded them instantly for chips or chocolate milk, but they always left an impression. Today, they are rarely seen, buried beneath layers of more polite sandwich options. But deviled ham was once a schoolyard standout, strange, spicy, and unforgettable. The muffaletta was not born in the average working man's kitchen, but it made its way there. Originating in New Orleans, it was a dense, round loaf stuffed with layers of salami, ham, mortadella, mozzarella, and provolone. The real magic came from the olive salad, chopped green and black olives, pickled vegetables, garlic, and oil, soaked into the bread like marinade. It was pressed, it was loud, it was messy, but it traveled well. That made it perfect for job sites, road crews, and long-haul truckers. You wrapped a wedge in foil, and it was still good hours later. The flavors deepened. The oil soaked in. You needed 2 hands to hold it, and at least 10 napkins. It was not dainty, but it was built to last. For men who worked through lunch or ate from the front seat, it was a solid, no-nonsense meal. A sandwich with weight. A sandwich with roots. It was not just New Orleans flair. It was lunch with attitude. Ash cakes stuffed with smoked rabbit were the kind of food you didn't find in markets. You had to earn them. Made by burying cornmeal dough directly into hot ashes beneath a fire, the outer layer blackened and crisped while the inside steamed to tender perfection. Once cooled, the cakes were split open and stuffed with shredded smoked rabbit, seasoned lightly with wild herbs or nothing at all. This was real survival fare, prepared deep in the woods or beside a smoldering hearth. The smoky flavors from both cake and meat melted together, making the whole thing taste like it had lived beside the fire for days. You could eat it hot, or wrap it in cloth and take it out again days later. There were no condiments, no napkins, no fancy names, just hunger and ingenuity. Some tribes even used clay to shield the dough from burning, peeling it off once baked. Today, ash cakes survive mostly as a footnote in cookbooks, and smoked rabbit is a rarity outside of specialty game markets. But once, these sandwiches were warm, smoky lifelines through long, lean winters. Pimento cheese sandwiches were a Southern love letter written in cheddar, mayonnaise, and bright red pimentos, served between soft white bread and packed with personality. This was not just a sandwich. It was a tradition, a ritual, and sometimes a dare for kids unfamiliar with its bold, tangy flavor. The cheese was sharp. The mayonnaise mellowed it out. The pimentos? They brought color, a hint of sweetness, and that unmistakable peppery kick. Pimento cheese was often whipped into a spread and slapped onto sandwich bread before being wrapped in wax paper and tossed into a lunchbox. It squished a little, stained the paper orange, and always felt like it had something to prove. Some kids swapped them, others hid them, but everyone remembered them. It was not the kind of sandwich that blended in, and that was the point. Over the years, it slipped out of school cafeterias and into specialty food menus, but back then, it was a staple that defined a region and a generation. It was homemade, it was messy, and it was honest. The baked bean sandwich was exactly what it sounds like. Nothing more, nothing less. You opened a can of baked beans, spooned them onto slices of white bread, and called it lunch. Maybe you added mustard, maybe a leaf of lettuce if you were feeling fancy. But mostly, it was just beans and bread. Cheap, filling, and easy to make with what was already in the pantry. It was not made with love, it was made with necessity. For working men with empty wallets and full houses, this was survival food. It gave energy. It lasted. It was hot or cold or whatever the day required. It might sound strange now, even laughable, but in its time, it made sense. It was a meal made from odds and ends, eaten fast before a shift or in silence after one. Some nights, all you needed was a bite and a break. This gave you both. Blue corn and mesquite sandwich cakes carried the breath of the Southwest in every bite. The blue cornmeal, nutty and rich, was mixed with ground mesquite pods to form small, cake-like breads that smelled faintly of sweet smoke and desert wind. These cakes were sliced and stuffed with roasted squash or mashed beans, hearty, warm, and subtly sweet. Made for fieldwork, hunting, or ceremonial journeys, they were often wrapped in cloth or corn husks and eaten days later. No preservatives, no frills, just flour, fire, and food. Today, blue corn still survives in niche markets and fry bread festivals, but the mesquite flavor, so once integral to the Southwestern palate, is fading fast. These little sandwich cakes were a survival food disguised as something sacred. Peanut butter and honey sandwiches were the gentle cousin of the classic peanut butter and jelly, quieter, softer, and maybe a little sweeter. Instead of fruit preserves, this version replaced the tang with something more mellow, something that stuck to the roof of your mouth and made your fingers smell like golden syrup all afternoon. It was the sandwich you got when the jelly jar was empty, but love was still in stock. A simple swipe of peanut butter on one slice, a drizzle of honey on the other, and two halves pressed together until the honey oozed just enough to make you pause. These sandwiches were often packed quickly, folded into wax paper, and slightly crushed by the weight of textbooks. But that did not matter. If anything, it made them better. There was something old-fashioned about it, something kind. Peanut butter and honey tasted like slow mornings, kind grandparents, and meals that did not need to be fancy to be filling. Today, they are harder to find in school cafeterias and less likely to show up in lunchboxes full of brand-name snacks. The Elvis sandwich is more than just a quirky snack. It's a piece of pop culture history. Legend has it, Elvis Presley adored this decadent combination: peanut butter, ripe banana, and crispy bacon layered between slices of white bread. Some say it must be pan-fried in butter until golden and melty. Others swear by the raw version, eaten cold in the dead of night. Either way, it's not exactly health food, it's more of a fever dream. This sandwich is sweet, salty, creamy, and crunchy all at once, much like the king himself. It became a symbol of indulgence, a recipe so outrageous it could only belong to someone larger than life. Fans have recreated it for decades, sometimes adding honey, sometimes toasting it, but always treating it like an edible homage. It's not just about flavor, it's about nostalgia, rebellion, and letting your taste buds run wild. The Elvis sandwich is one of those rare things you try once as a joke and then crave when nobody's watching. Just don't ask your doctor what they think about it. Elk jerky sliders on cedar buns were winter food with a scent you never forgot. Meaty, smoky, and soaked in the aroma of trees. This was not just lunch, this was ceremony. Elk jerky, cut thick and dried slow, was a prized food in the colder regions. When times were good, it got layered into small cedar-smoked buns made from flour mixed with bark ash or fir tips. Served at winter gatherings, these sliders were eaten cold or warm, sometimes dipped in broth or spiced oil. The cedar buns were not just flavor, they were preservative, story, and smoke all at once. The sandwich gave energy, preserved meat, and honored the animal. Today, jerky is processed and peppered with artificial sweeteners. The cedar has vanished, and so has the meaning. We made the meat last, but not the memory. What used to keep people alive through months of snow now lives in glass jars at gourmet stores. We call it rustic. We call it old-fashioned. But the people who made it were not trying to be cute. They were surviving. Can we even still taste the difference between survival and snack food? The lettuce sandwich was what you got when there was nothing else, and yet it became something more. Just 2 slices of bread and a few crisp leaves in between, maybe with a swipe of butter or a dusting of salt if someone was feeling generous. It was minimalist, it was plain, but in a strange way, it was also pure. In the early 20th century, when meat was a luxury and refrigeration was not guaranteed, the lettuce sandwich became a reliable go-to. It was light, refreshing, almost delicate in a time when food was anything but. Packed into school lunches, it was easy to make, hard to mess up, and always surprising in how much it satisfied. Kids might groan, but they still ate it, and maybe even liked it. Over time, it faded into punchlines and parody, replaced by protein-heavy, sauce-drenched monsters that took 3 napkins to conquer. But the lettuce sandwich was never trying to impress. It was just trying to get the job done. And sometimes, that was enough. The Kmart submarine sandwich was not just food. It was part of the shopping trip. You would head into Kmart for socks, a screwdriver, maybe a birthday card, and at the back of the store, the cafeteria called to you. That big white roll, sliced open and loaded with ham, salami, bologna, and slices of American cheese. lettuce, banana peppers, maybe a swipe of mustard or a dollop of mayonnaise, wrapped in wax paper and handed over the counter by a teenager in a paper hat. It was not gourmet, it was not healthy, but it was satisfying. It had heft. You sat at a red table with molded plastic chairs and bit in. It was salty and soft and just a little greasy. The flavors bled into the bread by the last bite. You drank a fountain soda and wiped your hands with a brown paper napkin. It felt like a reward for getting the errands done. It felt like a pause in a world that never stopped moving. The Kmart sub was not trying to be memorable, but it became a memory anyway. Opossum tail sandwiches with spice ash rub might raise eyebrows today, but in Southeastern traditions, they were once a beloved delicacy. The tails, slow cooked until the meat slipped off the bone, were seasoned with a rub made from charred herbs and spices. Yes, actual culinary ash. This gave the meat a smoky, aromatic flavor, unlike anything you'd find in modern barbecue. The ash rub wasn't just for flavor, it also helped preserve the meat slightly and added essential minerals to the diet. Back then, nothing was wasted. Opossum wasn't a last resort. It was a choice. Today, it's relegated to urban legends and offbeat cooking shows, but once it was part of regular tables and seasonal feasts. And in that context, it wasn't weird. It was just dinner. The bologna and ketchup sandwich was the lunchroom underdog, a squishy, no-frills sandwich that somehow earned its place among childhood favorites. It was cheap, fast, and unapologetically plain. A slice or two of bologna, straight from the fridge, slapped onto soft sandwich bread and dressed with a squirt of ketchup. That was it. No lettuce, no cheese, no frills. But in its simplicity was something oddly satisfying. The bologna was smooth and salty. The ketchup added tang and sweetness. The bread held it all together like a peace treaty between convenience and hunger. It showed up in mid-century lunchboxes packed by parents who needed to stretch a budget and feed a family. Kids would open their bags, see that red smear pressed through the plastic wrap, and know exactly what to expect. There was no surprise, and somehow that was comforting. It was a sandwich that never pretended to be more than it was, and maybe that is why it stuck around as long as it did. You rarely see them now, lost in a sea of organic spreads and artisanal fillings. The Sloppy Joe was chaotic. Ground beef simmered in a sweet and tangy tomato sauce, scooped onto a hamburger bun. It was never neat, it was never photogenic, but it was honest. Dads made it with a pound of ground beef and whatever was left in the pantry. Ketchup, tomato paste, onions, Worcestershire sauce. Sometimes it was just canned sauce from the store. You spooned it hot onto a bun, and it soaked through before the second bite. It dripped, it stained. You needed a stack of napkins and maybe a fork for the end. But it was warm. It was filling. It was 5 ingredients and 15 minutes from stove to table. For working men, it was dinner that looked like effort but cost very little. Kids liked it, adults tolerated it. Everyone knew it. The Sloppy Joe was not trying to impress, it was trying to feed you. And it did. Salmon belly sandwiches with wild greens were pure coastal power, fatty, rich fish layered with gathered greens and tucked into dough made from maize or even wrapped in kelp. The belly was the prized cut, oiled and luscious, smoked or seared just enough to flake apart. The greens were bitter or sharp, dandelion, nettle, or mustard leaves picked fresh from coastal soil. The bread varied, sometimes dense and baked, other times simply a blanket of dried seaweed. Either way, the effect was the same. Nourishment from land and sea, eaten slowly or taken for a cold journey ahead. Salmon belly is now tossed aside in favor of cleaner cuts. Wild greens are weeded out or sprayed over. And the knowledge of how they fit together? Nearly gone. These sandwiches were medicine in a way. They kept bones strong and hearts full. Now we barely know what to do with them. What happens when we forget how to eat the best parts? The tuna and cream cheese sandwich was what your grandmother made when she wanted to feed you something fancy that was also suspiciously efficient. It was a relic from the 1940s, a time when mayonnaise was not the only binder in town and lemon juice felt like fine dining. Chilled tuna blended with cream cheese, a touch of citrus, and sometimes even crushed pecans or chopped celery. This sandwich wore a pressed napkin and gave off a whiff of Sunday brunch in the cafeteria. Kids either loved it or politely folded it back into the sandwich bag and focused on their chocolate milk instead. The bread was often buttered, soft, and crustless if someone was feeling generous. What made this sandwich stick in the mind was its smoothness, its unexpected tang, and how it seemed to signal that whoever packed your lunch had a plan. This was not a slapdash peanut butter job. This was intentional. Over time, tuna salad took the spotlight and cream cheese retreated to bagels and frosting. But in lunchboxes from another era, it played a surprisingly elegant role. Cactus fruit and cornmeal sliders were the roadside miracle of the Southwest. Bright, spiced cactus fruit mashed and served inside thick patties made from masa. They were tangy, sweet, and just a little spicy. No two batches were ever the same. The cactus fruit, also called prickly pear, was roasted or boiled and sometimes mixed with chili or smoke-dried herbs. The cornmeal was turned into cakes or buns, fried golden on the outside and steaming inside. These sliders were eaten cold during treks, packed in wrapped leaves or thin cloth. The sugars gave energy. The corn kept the body going. They looked simple, but they were carefully balanced survival meals. Now, cactus fruit is made into candy or cocktail syrup. The cornmeal sliders, replaced by frozen buns and fast food slogans. These sandwiches were not designed for flavor alone. They were made for movement, for endurance, for life in the dry and open spaces. And when we stopped walking the same roads, we stopped making the same food. What else have we let dry up? Ribbon sandwiches looked like something from a dollhouse tea party, but they came from a place of real effort. Thin slices of bread were stacked in layers, each with a different filling, maybe egg salad, then ham spread, then cream cheese and olives. Sometimes the bread colors alternated too: white, wheat, rye, stacked in neat rectangles and trimmed of crusts. When sliced, they revealed pastel stripes like a surprise inside. They took time. They took care. And they were usually made by someone who wanted the table to feel special. You found them at showers, receptions, and the occasional work luncheon. They were not filling. They were not practical. But they said something else. They said someone went the extra step. Someone chose charm over calories. For working men, these sandwiches might have appeared only on holidays or community events, but when they did, they left a mark. You might not remember the speech or the decorations, but you remembered the sandwich that looked like a checkerboard. A reminder that even simple ingredients, arranged with love, could feel fancy. The Spam sandwich was once a lunchtime savior in lean times, born in the shadow of World War II and fed to generations of hungry kids and working parents. Just slice up a brick of Spam, fry it till golden and crisp on the edges, and sandwich it between two slices of bread. Sometimes mustard showed up, maybe a slice of cheese or a ring of pineapple if someone was feeling tropical. But most of the time, it was just Spam and white bread, eaten hot or cold. It was salty, savory, and always dependable. People loved it or hated it, but either way, it showed up at the table. In Hawaii, Spam sandwiches became something of an art form, embraced with pride and seasoned with local flair. In the mainland, they were often a holdover from tighter times, a cheap protein fix that filled the belly fast. For those who remember it, the Spam sandwich is a symbol of resilience, food that lasted even when the paycheck didn't. Ham salad sandwiches were what you made when dinner became tomorrow's lunch, and nothing went to waste. Chopped leftover ham mixed with mayonnaise, a spoonful of relish, and maybe a dash of mustard turned into something far greater than the sum of its parts. The result was creamy, salty, tangy, and just textured enough to let you know this was not store-bought. It sat heavy on white bread and came wrapped in wax paper or pressed gently into a sandwich bag that stuck to the crust by lunch hour. Kids either loved ham salad or politely declined the swap. It had presence. A slightly chunky spread with pink edges and flecks of green. Grandparents swore by it. Cafeterias served it weekly, and for a long time, it was a way to turn leftovers into something that felt brand new. It was a lunchbox classic for those raised with one hand on the cutting board and the other on the budget. Today, it rarely shows up in modern school lunches, replaced by prepackaged options and flashier flavors. Sunchoke and pine nut flatbread wraps were desert energy bars before energy bars existed. Sunchokes, those nutty, crunchy roots, were sliced thin, pan-roasted, and wrapped with toasted pine nuts inside maize flatbread. No sauce, no garnish, just sunlight turned into food. Southwest tribes used these for midday meals and travel snacks, giving bursts of energy without weighing the body down. Sunchokes, with their natural sweetness, paired perfectly with the buttery richness of pine nuts. The wrap was soft, earthy, and grounding. Nothing fancy, but everything thoughtful. You could walk all day with one of these in your satchel and still feel strong. Today, sunchokes are rediscovered only by chefs looking for obscure ingredients, while pine nuts are sold at luxury prices. The wrap? Gone. What was once survival food has become exotic. But there was nothing exotic about it when it kept you going through dry winds and endless miles. We did not call them superfoods. We just called them food. And that might be the biggest difference of all. Salmon salad sandwiches were the quiet cousins of tuna salad, just as creamy, just as homemade, but with a taste that caught you off guard. Made from canned salmon, mashed with mayonnaise and a few dashes of seasoning, it was a sandwich that felt fancier than it had any right to be. It sometimes had diced onion, sometimes celery, sometimes nothing but salt and pepper and whatever was on hand. Spread thick on white or rye bread, it carried the scent of the sea and the comfort of Sunday leftovers. It was not flashy, it was not for everyone, but it was honest. Salmon salad was often packed by parents or grandparents who remembered when fish was a treat, not just something from a drive-thru. It was nutritious, filling, and just enough out of the ordinary to make you notice. Kids either traded it away or claimed it proudly, like a secret code for being raised right. It rarely shows up in lunchboxes today, but in vintage kitchens and handwritten recipes it still holds its place. Quiet, consistent, and always just a little unexpected. The loose meat sandwich is like the sloppy Joe's tidy cousin. It skips the sweet tomato sauce and gets straight to the point. Seasoned ground beef crumbled and piled onto a soft hamburger bun. No binding agent, no fillers, just beefy goodness. This sandwich was made famous by made-right diners in the Midwest, where regulars would sit at Formica counters, watching steam rise from griddles. It's the kind of sandwich you eat leaning forward, elbows on the table, catching the loose bits before they hit your lap. Often dressed up with mustard, pickles, and onions, it's simple, filling, and oddly comforting in its messiness. There's something about the way it falls apart in your hands that makes it feel honest. Unpretentious food for unpretentious people. If you grew up anywhere near Iowa or Illinois, chances are you had one of these after Little League or in a small-town diner with a checkered floor and a waitress who called you hun. The loose meat sandwich never tried to be cool. It just stayed dependable. Maple venison biscuit sandwiches were the morning food of hunters, gatherers, and frost-covered fields. You could smell them from a distance. Grain-heavy biscuits cracked open with strips of venison glazed in maple syrup tucked inside like a gift. It was breakfast, yes, but also reward. The venison was lean and chewy, usually left over from stews or fire-cooked roasts. The maple syrup came from trees tapped by hand, slowly boiled down into a dark, sticky dream. When layered into biscuits made from wild or hand-ground grains, the result was a sweet, savory blend that filled the stomach and lifted the spirit. These sandwiches were often shared at sunup when the day was about to get long and hard. Today, you can find maple bacon on every diner menu, but maple venison? Almost never. The flavor has been replaced, commercialized, or forgotten entirely. But it once meant a good hunt, a warm hearth, a day that started with purpose. We traded it all in for drive-through versions that do not ask for anything from us. What do we lose when we stop earning our sweetness? Acorn bread and wild berry meat sandwiches were forest sandwiches in the truest sense, built from the woods and eaten in silence under trees. The bread came first, made from acorn flour that had to be soaked, pounded, and leached of bitterness. It was a chore, a ritual, and a necessity. Then came the filling, thin slices of dried venison or rabbit, layered with crushed blackberries, choke cherries, or huckleberries, depending on the season. The sweetness cut the gaminess. The bread crumbled just slightly as you bit in. This was a sandwich that kept for days, that filled you up without making you heavy. It tasted like bark, rain, and sweetness after struggle. It traveled well. It honored the land. Native children once carried these into the woods like modern kids carry packed lunches. Now, acorn flour is a novelty ingredient. Dried game is bought in sealed plastic, and the pairing of both with wild berries no supermarket can replicate has been mostly lost. If someone handed you one today, would your mouth even recognize it as food or just memory? We stopped making these not because they were bad, but because we stopped doing the work they required. And maybe that is what hurts most. Hot browns were not just sandwiches, they were events. Hailing from Louisville, Kentucky, the hot brown was the kind of school lunch you did not expect to see in your lunchbox. But when you did, everything else faded away. It was open-faced, built on toasted bread, and layered with turkey bacon and a thick, rich Mornay sauce that made it feel like something that belonged in a fancy hotel, not the corner of a cafeteria tray. The whole thing was broiled until bubbly, golden, and just messy enough to feel indulgent. It smelled like home. It tasted like someone had really tried. Most kids stared at it, confused. But for those who knew what they were looking at, it was heaven. Each bite was creamy, salty, and warm, something between comfort food and special occasion. You ate it with a fork, or tried to. It was not meant to be neat. It was meant to fill you up and slow you down. Today, you will find them in restaurants, dressed up and modernized. But nothing hits like the homemade version packed with love. Roll-up sandwiches were the lunchbox experiment that actually worked. You took a slice of white sandwich bread and flattened it with a rolling pin or glass until it looked more like a napkin than bread. Then came the filling: peanut butter and banana, cream cheese with chopped bacon, even tuna salad if someone was feeling brave. You spread it edge to edge, rolled it tight like a sleeping bag, then sliced it into pinwheels. It was a working-class solution to picky kids and tight mornings. You did not need fancy deli meats or artisan bread. You needed one hand and 5 minutes. Sometimes you sprinkled paprika on top for color. Sometimes you stabbed each one with a toothpick and called it party food. But really it was a clever way to stretch ingredients. They showed up at baby showers, church potlucks, and tired weeknight dinners. They were fast, they were cheap, and they made something boring feel like a treat. In homes where the toaster was always broken and the oven rarely used, the roll-up was reliable. Quiet, silly, and sometimes oddly perfect. Fry bread tacos with bison were once a communal crown jewel. Golden, pillowy fry bread packed with seasoned bison meat, often shredded or pan-seared. This was not fast food. This was food that took time, skill, and sacred memory. You could smell the crisping dough from 100 feet away at community gatherings, powwows, or even just a family weekend. The bison brought not only nutrition but reverence, an animal that gave everything and once blanketed the plains. Back then, bison was hunted with care, shared without hesitation, and seasoned with more than salt. These tacos might have been topped with beans, chilies, or a scoop of sweet squash mash, wrapped in foil or corn husk for later. Today, fry bread survives mostly through carnival stands and powwow vendors, but its pairing with bison has quietly slipped away. Why? Some of it is cost. Some of it is loss. Some of it is the fact that bison is no longer something families can just have. It has been pushed to novelty status. And fry bread, once born of government rations and survival, has been pulled into an uneasy spotlight. But if you ever had one of these tacos as a child, you remember the warmth. You remember that feeling of being full, for once, in more ways than one. Fluffer Nutters were the sugar bombs of childhood, smeared between slices of Wonder Bread like sticky little secrets. Made from peanut butter and marshmallow creme, this New England classic was as sweet as the recess bell and just as anticipated. No meat, no veggies, just a sugary swirl that glued your sandwich shut and made your fingers tacky with every bite. The texture was half the fun: soft bread, gooey center, and that unmistakable stretch of marshmallow when you pulled the halves apart. They were a staple of elementary school lunch tables, always wrapped in plastic and slightly flattened from being stuffed into a backpack. Every bite tasted like skipping spelling tests and drawing dinosaurs in the margins of your notebook. The Fluffernutter was not subtle, it was not sophisticated, but it made you feel like you were getting away with something. Over time, it disappeared from school menus and fell out of fashion, replaced by yogurts and wraps and grown-up meals for tiny hands. The cream cheese and olive sandwich was odd on paper but unforgettable in practice. Just white sandwich bread spread thick with whipped cream cheese, then speckled with chopped green olives. Briny, smooth, slightly sour. A strange comfort for those who grew up with it. Sometimes it was cut in triangles for parties. Sometimes it was wrapped in wax paper for lunch. But it always showed up where simplicity mattered. You did not need meat. You did not need heat. Just a butter knife and a jar of olives with the red pimento centers. The saltiness from the olives blended with the creamy base and softened bread to create a texture people still remember. It was budget-friendly and meatless before anyone called that a lifestyle. Working parents made it in minutes. It was not glamorous. It was not trendy. But it was honest. And for kids who grew up in towns where the grocery store had 4 aisles and one kind of cheese, this sandwich was just different enough to stand out. You might wrinkle your nose at it now, but back then it was part of growing up. Three Sisters pocket flatbreads were the closest thing to soul food that the soil itself ever gave. Inside a warm flatbread pocket went a mash of squash, beans, and corn, the Three Sisters of traditional native agriculture. They were not just ingredients, they were family. Grown together, harvested together, and eaten together. The flatbread was made from maize flour or leftover mash from the harvest, cooked hot and fast on stone or clay. The inside could be creamy or chunky depending on the cook, and was often flavored with wild garlic or chili. Children would eat them running. Elders would eat them slowly. They were warm, golden, and grounding. But they are almost entirely gone now, replaced by mass-produced breads and flavorless substitutions. You can still find the Three Sisters on school posters or in museums, but not folded into a meal you can hold in your hand. We broke apart what was always meant to stay together. And in doing so, we lost not just nutrition, but balance. Who decided we did not need to eat this way anymore? And what else have we unlearned because of it? Sloppy Joes were the lunchtime wild card. Messy, meaty, and guaranteed to stain your shirt. Every cafeteria had a day when trays were heavy with hamburger buns oozing with ground beef cooked in tomato sauce and mystery spices. It was not elegant, it was not clean, but it was comforting. Sloppy Joes were everything lunch was supposed to be. Warm, hearty, and just a little unruly. One bite and half of it landed on your tray. That was the rule. Napkins were never enough. These sandwiches showed up in school lunch lines, birthday parties, and weeknight dinners when parents had 30 minutes and a pound of beef. They were versatile, easy, and crowd-pleasing in the way only something unapologetically simple could be. The sauce was sweet and tangy, the meat hearty, the bun soft and doomed from the first bite. You could smell Sloppy Joe Day before you saw it on your plate. Over the years, they lost their place to healthier, neater options, but no one ever forgot them. The Turkey Devonshire was Pittsburgh's answer to comfort food sandwiches. It started with thick toast, usually white bread. Then came slices of roasted turkey, crispy bacon, tomato, and a hot cheese sauce. Poured on top and baked until bubbly. It was open-faced, served hot, and made you feel like you were eating something fancier than you actually were. It looked like it belonged on a diner plate under buzzing fluorescent lights. It was the kind of meal a tired father might throw together with leftover Thanksgiving turkey or deli slices. It was greasy. It was heavy. It stuck to your ribs. But it never left you hungry. It carried the mood of a city where winters were long, jobs were hard, and food needed to earn its keep. You might not have had the money for steak, but you could make this. And it tasted like someone tried. That was enough. Walnut paste and apple bark sandwiches sound like a woodland riddle, but they were once a clever traveler's snack. Walnut meats were ground into a thick, oily paste, protein-rich, slightly bitter, and deeply satisfying. That paste was spread onto thin sheets of dried apple slices, sometimes softened slightly by heat, other times left crisp and bark-like. The result was a kind of nut butter and fruit sandwich that could be folded up, packed away, and eaten on the go without spoiling. The flavor was earthy and sweet, with a dry crunch that left your mouth thirsty but your belly full. Some versions even included hickory nuts or a drizzle of wild honey when available, though those were luxuries. It didn't need to be pretty. It just needed to work. Today, apple bark is nearly unheard of, and walnut paste has been overtaken by peanut butter and branding. But this was the original trail ration, prepared without a kitchen, without a label, just hands, heat, and memory. If one of these sandwiches reminded you of a lunchbox, a parent, or a moment you hadn't thought about in years, leave a comment, give the video a like, and subscribe.